All right, welcome into the Boston Sports Beat. Greg Bedard here alongside. Greg, we're going to begin this show on a bit of a somber note with the news of the passing of David Patten, who was killed in a motorcycle accident at the age of 47. David Patten, of course, integral part of early 2000s Patriots Super Bowl champion teams. In 2001, he caught, obviously, the lone touchdown pass in that game versus the Rams. He caught one from Drew Bledsoe in the AFC Championship game, and numerous other contributions throughout that season. Anyone looking at his stats, nothing eye-popping about it, but this guy, I don't think we can overstate the value he had to that team at that time, particularly that 2001 edition.
Yeah, absolutely. You're talking about a guy who, came from humble beginnings, a very varied role in road to the NFL and to the Patriots. And, he was just one of those guys with his background, who he was, what he did on the field, the willingness to do anything for the team. He sort of is one of those guys that's just, emblematic of those early dynasty teams for the Patriots. I mean, I think there was one game where he caught, ran, and threw touchdowns.
Yeah. He caught two, threw one, and ran another on a reverse.
Yeah, and just it's funny, watching some of the highlights that people are posting after his passing, and it's just, you watch them and you're just like, man, the Patriots could use a few of those guys, with his ability. I mean, the guy was a tremendous athlete and
amazing athlete, right? Had hands, fast as hell.
Some of the, his Super Bowl catch. I mean, that's just the how hard that was. I mean, It wasn't even. I wouldn't even say it was a great pass by Brady.
Floated
and Patten just made a tremendous adjustment on it, and the ability to catch it midair. I mean, just look at the pass that Wes Welker and Brady didn't make in that Super Bowl. It's somewhat similar, but Patten makes it because he's that kind of athlete. Welker just wasn't that kind of athlete. He was a good player, but that's just not his type of pass. But the way that Robert Kraft, Bill Belichick, we heard from a lot of his former teammates on social media, the way they talked about him just shows you, like, the guy had universal respect, was the ultimate teammate, and it's sad that he's gone so soon.
And again, it's people of of our generation, certainly if older, even a little younger, but again, just what that team, everything that team went through to get to where they've got, it almost had to be perfect along the way. You remove almost any one thing or one important cog from that team, and it doesn't get where it would have gotten to ultimately. David Patten definitely qualifies as one of those players, and that's his contributions during the regular season and the postseason. So again, no David Patten, no 2001 Super Bowl. I don't think there's really any question about that. Moving on to this year's team, it's full-on Mac Jones era in Foxborough, practicing, wrapping it up, and then next week it's all a go for the week one opener against Miami. One interesting conversation I've seen thrown around, I just want your take on it. Expectations for Mac Jones are obviously through the roof. Everyone's trying to pump the brakes a little bit on him, but again, we haven't seen a quarterback, certainly a rookie quarterback or a young quarterback, look this ready this early. Obviously, since Tom Brady took over for the Patriots back in 2001. Now, fair or not fair, Jones is going to be compared to Brady, and he already is for his style of play and a lot of the things that he does. But I think it's unfair to think you're comparing him to the best version of Brady. Let's look at the 2001 version of Brady and the 2021 version of Mac Jones and compare those two, how they came into their roles, and whether or not those are more realistic expectations for what Mac might be able to achieve in year one.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you're talking about a guy in Brady who, I think in 13 games, I think he was sacked 41 times. The stats aren't going to blow you away. But I do think, and I think we've talked about this before, it's a much different era in terms of quarterbacking and what you can do when. And, these guys that, they're in these high level 7-on-7 camps, as sophomores and juniors in high school, and they're just so far ahead of the game than where Brady was 20 years ago. And so I I have high expectations for Mac. I mean, is he going to win a Super Bowl? I mean, I doubt it, but I think in terms of you put together this team where they are, that offensive line, the running game, the weapons are going to take time. But you put Mac Jones with Josh McDaniels, who's one of the smartest coaches out there. Josh McDaniels is not going to, expose Mac Jones to things that he can't handle. And you combine the McDaniels coaching and Mac Jones's accuracy and ability to execute. I have pretty high expectations. This is not your normal rookie quarterback, in my opinion, because of how good this team is. Most rookie quarterbacks come, like look at Zach Wilson with the Jets. The Jets are going to be terrible. I think Zach Wilson is tremendous. Will Mac Jones probably have a better year than Zach Wilson? Yeah, probably, because he's on a better team and better coaches, proven coaches. And so, I think that Mac Jones, at the end of the day, if you compare the stats between Brady in 2001 and Mac Jones this year, I think Mac Jones is going to come out ahead in a lot of different areas. Some of that is circumstances. Some of that is just the different eras in the NFL.
Yeah, and you mentioned the coaching. I think that's something that's super underrated specifically in a quarterback's development. Which coach you have when you're trying to crack in may make all the difference in how your trajectory in the NFL goes. We've seen a ton of young quarterbacks with a ton of talent in the wrong system earlier with the wrong coach who does not put them in a position to succeed. And I think the Patriots obviously will. Back then, it's obviously not McDaniels, but the Patriots with Brady in 2001, he was a game manager. I mean, there are some people who still, even after the Super Bowl, were thinking, I might still want Bledsoe out there slinging it instead of Tom, because he just looks like this check down king. So the jury was out on Brady even after he had, won a Super Bowl and was clearly the starter on that team. And you saw what happened next year. And, Bledsoe goes off and starts lighting it up in Buffalo. And some people were like, I don't know, did we do the right thing? So it definitely, I think people forget that about Brady. It took a while for Brady to be Brady. And it certainly didn't come in the first couple of years, and Mac might have the opportunity to surpass that. All right, switching gears to Celtics. Sherrod Blakely, Celtics insider, along here, and we have a deal, Sherrod. Celtics making a move. Let's go over it for our audience here. They acquired Juancho Hernangomez from the Grizzlies. He didn't play a second for the Grizzlies. He was with Minnesota last year. For Kris Dunn, who didn't play a second for the Celtics as well. So these guys have been traded twice, and they never played for that kind of mid-stop. And goodbye, Carsen Edwards. There might be some people out there who are sad about this. Yeah, shed a tear. There were a lot of high hopes when Carsen was drafted. Might have been a steal. We'll get into all of that. But first, just your initial thoughts on this deal. Does it make the Celtics any better? Does it move the needle at all?
Well, to me, what the Celtics are doing is they're building a team that if they're going to be successful, they're going to be the slow drip, death by cuts type of team where they don't have a great 2 or 3 guys. They're going to beat you with 9 or 10 guys that are going to slowly but surely chip away at you, jab you, poke you, and just slowly beat you that way. That's their pathway to success. Adding Hernangomez at this point, to me, looking at his game, looking at his numbers, he's somewhere between. He's a stretch big, but he's somewhere between Kelly Olynyk and Daniel Tice. And I say that because he, I think, is a little bit more of a physical rebounding type than Kelly, but doesn't shoot nearly with that type of volume. And as far as Daniel, I think is more of a low post threat, but I think Hernangomez gives you more of a perimeter option. And if you're looking at the Celtics team, the type of lineups that they're going to roll out there, at some point, they're going to play teams that are going to go ridiculously small. And he's perfectly suited in those situations, being a 6'9" guy, 6'11" wingspan, shoots in the low to mid 30s from 3-point range, which means when he's on the floor, you got to respect that.
Right. So again, and I think it's just, you basically traded 2 guys that were bubble guys, are really not going to play for the Celtics. So I think that makes sense doing this. At the end of the day, though, I don't expect a huge impact here, or maybe you do. Do you think that this is a guy who theoretically could crack a rotation, or are we talking someone who's on the 10 to 12 end of the bench and might sneak in for some minutes?
I think he's going to get very sporadic minutes. I don't think that what he brings to the table is necessarily going to move the needle. But the thing about the Celtics, they're trying to get a deeper roster than we've seen in the past, guys that have the type of skills that could potentially help you. It would not surprise me if he had a 5, 6, 7, 8 game stretch where he was in the rotation and they played, a bunch of teams that played a lot of small ball, because I do think in a small ball lineup, he can be very effective. But I just don't think that he's a guy that's going to move the needle and frankly give them all of a sudden another 8, 9 wins. That ain't going to happen. He gives them another option, which at this point, that's what I think Brad Stevens and Ime Udoka are trying to build, a team with lots of different options.
Okay, moving on. And again, this is not a real thing, but it's something that exists out there.
It's about to get real, John, right now.
If any player of any note is made available, or wants a trade, immediately you're going to ask, especially when you see the price dropping, and you really want to buy the dip here. So I remember in the offseason, and we're talking, of course, about Ben Simmons. I remember in the offseason, there's a huge stir caused when people were talking about Ben Simmons for Jaylen Brown. Would you do it? And Celtics fans literally tried to kill all of us, or everybody who even entertained that as an idea. And certainly you don't want to talk about trading a real piece of the Celtics. But if Philly is desperate, having a difficult time, and this becomes an untenable situation and or a salary dump, should the Celtics knock on the door and say, what would it take? Is there any world in which you could see entertaining the idea of a Ben Simmons trade for the Celtics?
I could absolutely see it happening if the price keeps dropping. To me, it's going to be one of those things where Ben Simmons would have to say, I want to play with Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, because there's no way that they're going to get either one of those guys, Philly that is, in exchange for Ben. It just won't happen. I look at this as a situation where, remember a few weeks ago, all the talk about Dennis Schroeder and his future, Celtics were nowhere on the radar. The thinking was that there's no way in hell that he would wind up in Boston, because he's going to demand too much money, and they're just not going to make the money work. And then lo and behold, they get him for like less than $6 million. If you can somehow finagle a way to get Ben Simmons, and it doesn't cost you in any way, shape, or form, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Robert Williams, Al Horford, if you can keep that foursome intact and add Ben Simmons and with some type of combination of the other guys, hell yeah. Do that.
I wish,
and I think it'll happen, but that to me, that's what would make me want to bring him.
What I love is, again, it's like, it's fantasy football draft season. So I'll use that analogy. You see guys where all of a sudden the hatred just gets way too big. And you're like, this guy's a value right now. Would I start my team with this person? Maybe not anymore. The problem with Simmons really, but when you see that value, we're having conversations, in side chats, and I'm listening to people on Twitter, and they think this guy's a bum, a role player, just because of one postseason where his free throw shooting went just completely off the chains bad. And he's never been good, but he's 60% every single year. He's basically the same guy. He's been the same guy. It's frustrating he hasn't improved in such a minor thing in his game, which would open up so many other things, but he hasn't. But I think people overdid it with how bad this guy is. You wish you could buy the dip, but he makes so much freaking money and he's under contract till 25. It's a tough one. It's a really tough thing for any team. It's a massive commitment if you're bringing on this guy. I would say if he had Jaylen Brown's contract, I would be very interested in seeing this, because this is a guy who, despite his flaws, is still elite at several things. Elite, and that's hard to find.
It is, and particularly elite with a long-term contract and still relatively young in terms of being an NBA player. So there's a lot of positives about him as a player. But to your point, John, that damn contract, it's what makes a lot of people hit the pause button on the Ben Simmons bring him to my city campaign, because he makes max dollars. And to me, it's not even so much about that one moment where he basically, he choked. He had a dunk in a pivotal game.
That's the signature moment. But people are going to point to, I think it was like 32% from the free throw line all playoffs long.
Right. But the thing about Ben is that when you have his elite talents, and we know they exist, and you have a clear and undeniable flaw in your game, and you don't do a damn thing for years, to improve in that one area that everyone is telling you and everyone can see is a problem. That's the problem. It's not so much the moment, it's the fact that you haven't learned from the moment and made yourself better, or hell, forget about make yourself better. Try to be better. Try.
Be the best version.
I'm not asking you to be Ray Allen, but damn, can you at least be Allen Ray? Can I get an Allen Ray out of you?
What do we want, Sherrod? We want him to be the best version of himself. That's all you want.
But he's stop, Brad Stevens. Stop it, damn it. Didn't we just move you to the front of the line? We don't need your coaching.
Just be the best version of yourself.
Just take a damn shot. That's
know.
all. I don't need you to be an all-star elite three-point shooter. You don't, I mean, to me, at this point, forget about elite shooters. Be freaking DeMar DeRozan and shoot the damn mid-range.
How much of it is, I mean, with that, and again, we've talked about this a lot. What I don't fully understand is how much of that is strictly based off of ego. Like, I don't want to suck at something, okay? And I don't want you guys to see me suck. So in a closed gym, working with a personal trainer or working with a shot guru, yeah, I'll go up there and I'll jack a bunch of shots and mess around with it. But the fact that he's even afraid to do it in like the exhibition season or in practice, if I were a coach, I would tell him, I want 10 threes out of you in this exhibition game. I do not care if a single one goes in. I just want you to get used to shoot them. Every single time, I want you to drift to the three-point line, and when you get it, I want you to launch it. I do not care. But he won't do it because I think the embarrassment of going 0 for 10, even in a preseason game, it would be a headline ever. It would be a Twitter meme. It's definitely in his head. He does not want to look bad.
Right. And the problem with that mindset, and I've talked to a couple of scouts about this, is that he's already put a cap on how good he's going to be.
Right.
And to have a max contract, to be that young, and you already have a cap on how good you're going to be, never mind what teams think about you, never mind what your teammates or your coach, you have put a personal limitation on how much you're going to grow. That makes every single team that has the slightest interest in you pause and think, I don't think this is going to work out, because you have you're basically, we call that self-check, where I don't really have to check you. You've already checked yourself. When you're defending Ben Simmons, you're not really, he's double teamed every time he has the ball by whoever's in front of him and himself. You can't win with that. That's why any deal Philadelphia can get at this point, they really need to think long and hard about taking it, because the offers are not going to get better.
Yeah, I mean, and in today's NBA, you can't really hide. I think the natural thing for him to do is transition to power forward, where it wouldn't be as big a deal there, versus when he's your point guard and he's the guy at the top of the key and the defense is collapsing and playing off the guy who's got the ball in his hands the whole time. Maybe there's that, but even there, you really want that position to be able to shoot a little. And that, again, it's just a problem for him. This has been Boston Sports Beat. Sherrod Blakely, thanks a lot, bud.